Hi everyone, hello to the Stronger Together community, and welcome to my second video of the channel. So I decided to do my first actual video on how to get into Google. And I'm thinking this may become a series. We're going to start with just myself and how I got into Google to give my personal story. But everyone's story is a little bit different, and my background is very specific, and so I'd love to give other women around Google the opportunity to share their story, because their backgrounds are a little bit different. You know, everyone has different years of experience coming into Google, and so I wanted to give kind of a varied picture of the type of women that get into Google, because this content for this channel is focused on helping women in technology. A lot of the content is going to focus on women in data science, but I'm thinking to branch out just a little bit here and there, kind of where it's applicable, to include just all of women in technology, just to give a little broader scope there, because I know we've probably got viewers who are interested in that content. So I've got a couple of women lined up who are willing to do that. Please post in the chat if that interests you, and if there's a particular position in Google that you would like for me to hunt down and see if someone's willing to give their thoughts on it. Please put that in the chat, just so I can try to give meaningful content to people that's going to help them. So this video is going to be how to get into Google for customer engineer, specifically an artificial intelligence, machine learning type of person. So we're going to start off with the resume that actually got me into Google, the exact one. We're going to go over that. I'm going to show you the job description that I applied for that ended up getting me the job, but also I'm going to show you the job description that did not give me a call back. And we're going to talk about why that might be. And then I'm going to go over what I did to prepare for the interview and what I felt was helpful. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so what you're seeing right here is the resume that actually got me into Google. I'm going to provide a link to this so that you guys can just download it and play around with it and use the template, because obviously it worked to get me in here. So I just want to point out a few things here that I felt like were helpful. So the first thing is this, there's a little bit of fanciness here. So I actually designed this part myself as just a series of like circles and straight lines to look like kind of neural networky. So I feel like that gave it a pop. I have no idea if that matters. Obviously the algorithms are not going to pick up on that, but the actual human who looks at it might think that's kind of cool. I'm sure everyone has their own take. So someone else may think that's like really over the top or, unprofessional, whatever. I know a lot of people that do just black and white resumes. So take that for what it's worth. This is an actual resume that did get into Google. The other thing that I did that I feel like is helpful is just under my name, I put AI specialist. So that is not to be confused with my job title or my current job title. That is more what I do. So for you, that may be software engineer or artificial intelligence evangelist. You can pick out a word that really speaks to not just what you're doing now, but what you hope to do at Google. You could tie that into the job description somehow without saying explicitly customer engineer, because that might be a little off, but something that speaks to the heart of your passion around your work and kind of what you hope to achieve long term. The other thing I did here is this 2021 Emerging Technologist Abby Award nominee. I was a nominee at the time. I didn't actually end up receiving the award, but I was still in the nominee phase. So that means I could have also not gotten that award, but just being a nominee is kind of a cool thing to put on there. So if you are up for an award or you were a nominee at one point, don't be afraid to put that there if you feel like that's something kind of cool to add to to your personal brand. So if you don't have an award, that could be something like a kudos or a quote from a colleague that said like, Eden is really is a super creative thinker. Something like that, a little tagline. So those first three aspects right under my name, people are going to read that, hopefully, I'm assuming, and take that into consideration. The second thing I did was I have these little icons. I love icons. I think that they make resumes much more readable and consumable, kind of wherever applicable. I've seen people put, like if they're certified in a certain software platform, actually putting the logo of the platform within their key skill areas, things like that, just to liven it up and brighten it up. The other thing I did that I thought was helpful was bold the keywords that I thought were important. You can always count on anyone reviewing resumes, because they read so many, to skim. So help them skim. Help them by bolding words, keeping language concise, condensed. If they're intrigued and they want to read more, they can, but help them to skim in whatever way that you can, because you can guarantee pretty much that no one's going to spend longer than 10 seconds reading your resume. So a good test for this is print out your resume, send it to a few friends, allow them to only look at your resume for 10 seconds, take it away, and ask them what they recalled about your resume. So, and designed for a specific position, which we're going to get into in just a sec. So if I was applying for something like a software development job, I would bold completely different words around here, assuming that I would be applicable for that, which I don't think I am. But I would go about this in a completely different way depending on what position I was applying for. Second thing is, a lot of people push on a one-page resume. I really don't know how helpful that is. I really like this first page to be a 30,000-foot view of who I am and what my skills are, and then I provide details later. So I'm a huge fan of tables and having this alternating color design here, as well as lines throughout, just so that it's really easy to read. Again, make this easy to skim. I can't emphasize that enough. So the key skill areas are different than these technology, software, and business tools. So this is more kind of anything that you're good at that's not a specific tool. So you wouldn't put Python or like AWS up here. You'd put, like I've got here, multivariate analysis, AI and ML, topic modeling. It's good to put as many keywords as possible in here, because those will help you get caught in the algorithms. So take that for what it's worth. The more you can pack your resume with language that is applicable to the position you're applying for, the better. Got my education, you kind of have to do that. And then the technology, software, and business tools, I kind of try to group these instead of just mashing them all in here. You see I've kind of got, like, this column is sort of micro web app development. This is, like Jira, Confluence, GitHub. These are kind of all sort of related, and version control and like teaming and stuff. And then I've got like a natural language processing kind of group over here, just to kind of make it easy to consume again. Past that, just the chronological summary of my employment. So always, everybody kind of formats this different. I don't know if there's a true rule of thumb here, but again, I use bolding. I've seen people use bolding throughout the entire experience here. So that's the other thing that I'll touch on here, is that it's not super important to only put experience on your resume that is something that you got paid to do. If you volunteered for something and you didn't actually get paid for it, that doesn't matter. Like, this is experience. It's not, there's nothing to stop you from, you learn something from that experience, right? If you did a side project on your own, put it on here. Like, everything that you do is useful as long as you've got something out of it and can speak to it. The other thing is that you want to put key takeaways from here. So something like, let's see here, wrote complex data wrangling transformation scripts using both traditional and fuzzy matching logic to disambiguate data sources. So I've got like a so what factor here. The so what was I disambiguated the data sources. You can put numbers around there like increased ROI by such and such number, or I automated a task that saved the human workers 50 hours of labor hours per week across the team. Something like that is always good. Backing everything with numbers. That is always great to have there. Let's see, what else do I have here? Yeah, so for folks who are earlier on in their careers, you may think, I'm just out of school, I don't have any experience, how am I going to get hired? So one thing you can do is that you can make your own experience while you're in school. So make sure that every project that you do at the end of the semester is something that's worthy of putting it on your resume. I made the mistake of doing kind of fun projects that weren't super professionally focused while I was in the school, and I really regretted that. So actually having real projects on here that had impact, like at one point, I did actually do something that was kind of meaningful. I did an independent academic project on quantifying Bangladeshi women's empowerment. So I feel like that was worthy of putting on my resume. While I was actually working at American University as a front desk assistant, I volunteered to do an emissions forecasting research project on the side. So nobody asked me to do that, but I asked my boss if he'd be interested in me doing some free research for him, and of course he said, fantastic, of course, why would I mind? And I presented the research to him, and they may or may not have actually done anything with that, but it was an interesting project for me to do that had some kind of business outcome that I could then talk about. So you can really stretch that, and it's really, you've got to get creative, you got to be gritty, and just get as much as you can, because you don't want to be caught flat-footed in the interview not having anything to talk about. So that was it for the resume. Now let's move on to the position that I actually applied for. So I just pasted it into a Word document the day that it came out, so I would have this information handy for when I started to just prepare for the interviews. So sales engineer, public sector. So this is actually just another word for customer engineer, I found out. So I was encouraged to apply to this one for that. So when you see sales engineer, that's customer engineer. The other qualifications here, so bachelor's degree, so I had that. The general rule of thumb is that you can apply to a position as long as you meet at least 70% of the qualifications. So experience in virtualization or cloud native architectures and a customer-facing support role. I've really done that at Booz Allen. Not all of my clients were cloud users, but enough that I was able to speak to that. And then experience working in the public sector. This turned out to be probably the biggest factor in my background that I think made me the most competitive, because they wanted someone who, it's one of those sectors that people, either they like it or they hate it. So they wanted to make sure that basically we knew what we were getting into. So I had that, check that box, and then experience in performing technical presentations and public speaking. I've been a consultant for 6 years by the time when I was applying, so I had that. And then advanced degree under the preferred qualifications. So I checked all the boxes here. Advanced degree, I had that. I have a master's degree in quantitative analytics, statistics. Significant experience in Linux, software networks, blah, blah, blah. I got all this stuff. Yep, got that. Experience in virtualization, networking, and storage technology. So a little bit, like not super a lot, but I used AWS and was storing and creating S3 buckets and EC2 instances and stuff like that. So I felt like that was, I could speak to that. Experience with relational databases. Yep. So that's, I think it's hard not to have that if you're a data scientist. and then experience with application development technologies, architecting and developing software, infrastructure for scalable and secure distributed systems. So yep, I built an app recently and using AWS. So I was able to speak to that. And then as part of some of my work at Busan, I had done some stuff there. So ability to define a technical migration roadmap to the cloud. Yeah, I had done that. And I actually spoke to that in my presentation as well. You have to do a presentation at the end of your interview process. So yeah, I was actually able to meet all of the qualifications here. So once I submitted my application on a Monday. I heard back from a recruiter within the hour. So I don't want that to scare you if you haven't heard from somebody and you've applied that you haven't heard within the hour. I just wanted to give that as a data point to kind of keep in your mind. So Googlers don't work on weekends, so don't expect a call back if you apply on a weekend. But this one I applied to over a weekend before that application that I just showed you. Data and sales engineer, data analytics. So same customer engineer. And I pretty much ticked all the boxes here as well, but didn't get a call back at all. Like no one even sent me a thanks for applying, but we're not interested kind of thing. So yeah, I don't really know what to say there other than that the public sector experience really seemed to be what the recruiter was most interested in talking to me about, because they wanted somebody who knew that customer base. So, all right, let's see, in the resume we did. So I also wanted to say that part of your interview process is, so it starts with the initial screening with the recruiter, and then you'll talk to your like actual recruiter after that, and they'll just tell you a little bit about the role. And that's not really an interview; they're just getting you set up with logistics. So let's see. They give you this little paper that tells you about like the interview process. So yeah, part 1 consists of general cognitive ability. That's 45 minutes. And then the role-related knowledge. So I'm going to show you some of the prep materials that I used for those 2 things. General cognitive ability, don't expect anything on your domain expertise for those questions. They are meant to be kind of for anybody to fit through, and they're just looking about how you think through a problem. So the best advice that I got was to work through an interview framework. Another Googler who I met walked me through how to do that. And then Jeff H. Sipe, he is all over YouTube. He does a lot of great YouTube videos, which I'm going to link in the bottom because they were super helpful for me. I watched his videos several times over, like each one I watched several times to get a good handle on this part. That he encouraged his advice there, which was really helpful for me, was to don't just try and figure out all the different questions that people have been asked and try to just hope that you get one that you've already answered, like memorizing stuff. Fall back on a framework. So what does that mean? So this is what I did. I had this one pager with some Google Cloud Platform products that I could name, because I wasn't super familiar with Google Cloud at the time. So I could name drop these if I needed to. And then I've got my problem solving framework here. So you'll get a question that's something like, for example, you've got a customer who wants your advice on where to set up their next data center. What would be your approach? So I don't know anything about data centers. But I just tried to use my logic, and so that might be something like, okay, so clarifying questions and background. So first of all, I'd want to know a little bit about the history of the problem and why they're thinking about opening up a new data center, and then what some of their cost restrictions might be for this history piece, some of the obstacles that they might be facing, such as like personnel or they're bounded to certain regions of a location that they have to stay within? Do they have data that could be used to inform the decision? Like, number of users in certain zip codes or something like that, because you want to obviously have a data center that's close to your users. And you want to factor in weather of locations and the probability of there being a hurricane or a tornado or something that might destroy the facility. Because you probably wouldn't want to put a building in a place that's high likelihood of being damaged and wiping out your resources. That would be terrible, right? So this is all like, I don't know anything about data centers. I'm just trying to think through logically. Players that are involved in the problem, you could say something like, I want to know who has a stake here, who are the main players here, a little bit about company IT structure, not applicable here, but it may come up. And then the customer's appetite for risk. So would you be okay going with a cheaper place if it meant that there was a risk for power outages more often or something like that? Maybe cost is more important to them and they're okay with taking risk. You never know. And then I've got this implementation, solution, and measure effectiveness. So gathering requirements, as I mentioned, like scope, scale, budget, timeline. What type of customer are they? Probably not applicable in this case, but if you got asked something like, your customer wants to modernize their IT application, what would you encourage them to think through? You'd want to know more about them. Are they a platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, container as a service? What do they offer? What is their projected ROI with this change? And what do they want to accomplish with the change? What are the competitors using? What's their market share like? Who are the stakeholders? What are some potential roadblocks? And then metrics for measuring success. So there's just like, you basically just want to talk about this for as long as you can, because they'll cut you off and say, that's enough, I have enough information, let's move on to the next question. So just try and talk in as much detail as you possibly can to just show them that you think logically, you try and back everything with data, that you're thinking very systematically through the problem, and not just trying to rely on instinct or God forbid you get just frozen and you can't answer. So practice on a few questions like that. For the actual interview, I had this, why Google, why me? I had, if I got asked about why Google, I had a couple of points here. Real products for real people. Basically, why do I want to come work for you? That's really important, right? They want to make sure that you actually want to come work for them and that you're going to stay there. And so I had plenty of things to talk about there because I really wanted to work for Google. And then why me? What value can I add to Google? You really want to be able to speak coherently to that and have a couple of strong points here. I had like strong business acumen, and I had a recommendation letter. Creative. My colleagues always, don't just say I'm creative. You could say, my colleagues all say that I think about the problem and solutions in a very unique way, and that's been a consistent feedback that I've gotten. I'm very strategic, collaborative, and then back everything up with some example of the thing that you did to kind of prove that. So I liked this format because I had points that I could look onto as I was going through the interview. I practiced it several times just so I wasn't caught frozen. And the last one here, how I'm looking to grow at Google. That's also super important too. Companies want to know that you're with them for longer than just a year or so, right? They want to make sure that you're going to be there at least a few years to really get their investment out of you. So they want to make sure that you're thinking about the long-term game with you, and they're not just thinking about Google as a stepping stone. Not that you ever would, but or that maybe the position you're thinking is a stepping stone for you. And then I had my experience, so I just tried to boil down my experience in a condensed way because I'm the type of person that may just freeze up and forget everything that I've done over the past 6-7 years. So just high points, like key takeaways that I wanted to get out of the experience, because that's almost always, I don't even know if I got asked this on my interview, I'm trying to think, but probably early on I got asked about, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so this is like a good way to just go through that script. Going back through, I've worked at the IRS, the VA, the Department of Labor, Department of Energy, and these are the like main projects that I did there, so you can hit on all the things that they wanted in the job description. So I always had the job description in front of me, so that I hit on everything in the job description. And that's probably, I'm assuming, a recruiter is going through the job description saying, okay, she ticks this box, she ticks that box. Yep, okay. She passes the test. It's the hiring manager that actually makes the decision, I'm assuming. So I always hear that people get asked at Google interviews about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. So definitely think hard about weaknesses, one. So it can't be one of those self-inflating weaknesses like, I work too hard. Google will see right through that. They really genuinely want to know what you're working on. So for me, I said that I wanted to work more on concise and strengthened communication with both clients and colleagues. So I said, I'm been doing this for a while, but I could really work on just more concise language with clients and just like a much stronger message. And I feel confident, but I know that I could raise the bar a little bit more on that. So it shows that you're working on something. It shows you've put thought into it, you recognize it, and you're putting some effort into growing in that area. I also had some questions for the interviewer here, the overall framework for the GCA, the general cognitive ability, had a little bit more on the framework, understand the problem by asking clarifying questions, which we just went over, and getting additional context. This is just stuff I found around Google, not Google, like Google search. And then prepare by verbalizing the data needed to identify a solution. This is big. Google's big on data. So always think about, where could I find more data to answer the problem? Then you identify a solution, feel free to weigh options, but ultimately articulate your recommendation, and then support your solution with something. What was the overall outcome or result? Explain how you'd track effectiveness over time. And I think this was from Jeff H. Sipe. I'll link the source here, but this was just kind of a visual conception of that I found helpful to work through. For the Googliness and leadership part of the interview, every advice I heard was to work through the STAR questions. What's the situation, what's the task, what's the action, and what are the results? So I found this little snippet here useful. I just studied this, I memorized it, so that whenever I got asked a question, I was able to fall back on this. And then I had, what do you do when someone is being left out? Sorry, I've got a little typo there. So this is, what do you do when someone is being left out of a meeting? So I had a framework for that, and I just tried to practice as many questions as I could. So clarifying question, I'd like to know a little bit more about this person. Is the person new to the team? Is his or her relationship to Google and you? What is the person's relationship to my position? Are they a peer, a direct report? How long have they been working with him or her? So you don't just want to spit out an answer like, this is what I do, because you probably made some assumptions with your answer, like that they were a peer, or like that we'd been working together for a short period of time. And you never want to make assumptions when you're a customer engineer, because that's where you fall into traps, right? So they want to make sure that you don't do that, and that you kind of default into assuming that you know nothing, asking clarifying questions to the customer to just make sure that your solution that you put together is meaningful to them and is impactful. And a framework here for how to approach the person, use collaborative language, communication, listening, get the person to say yes as much as possible, and use empathy, trust, and lean back on mental health as kind of the few areas for how I would actually approach the person once the conversation actually happened. for the solution here. Let's see, and put me in the room, have the interviewer visualizing me in the room, focus in on communication with the person, I come in with the lens of empathy and trust. So I'll just kind of share this so you guys can sort of pause there and take a screenshot or whatever. And then finally shifting into the solution here. So with your permission, I'd like to discuss something that might help the success of the relationship, the project, whatever. It seems like you've been left out, and inclusivity is critical for all of your success. Is there anything I can do for you to create a better environment for you? If they're open to it, create an action plan. So notice I'm not actually creating a plan. I'm just really talking about how I would approach the person. I think let me see if I can go. I think some of the links that I'm going to share with you actually go over this in detail from Jeff Sipe. He's awesome. You can actually book time with him, but it was out of my budget. Tell me about a time that you were asked to do something unethical. These are just all questions that I got from around YouTube and Google search of questions that other recruiters, like Jeff had mentioned, were questions that might be asked. And it's not so much important to focus on trying to anticipate what the questions are going to be. It's more just working through how you approach problem solving holistically, gathering data points and being empathetic and all of that. I just want to show you the kind of level of effort that I put into preparing for this. I didn't know anything about Google Cloud Platform, so I just put a few notes here on what their selling points are in case they asked, or if I could drop that into conversation. It's always nice. TensorFlow is a big one for machine learning, so I just had to paste it in a bunch of stuff here about what TensorFlow is, how it works, so that I used it before, but I had never sold it before, so I wanted to see just have some language ready there for what the benefits are. That's ultimately what the role is pre-sales. So that was pretty much it here. The other thing I did for role-related knowledge was I spent quite a bit of time coming up with a data science dictionary, a data scientist tool belt as I was preparing for this interview, because gosh, there's so many things that you can know about as a data scientist. There's clustering, unsupervised learning, just like tons of stuff. And it had been 6 years since I was actually in a degree program, and all of that information was fresher on my mind. But it's like one of those things, if you haven't used it for a while, you forget about some of the details, like confusion matrix and when is it appropriate to use precision over recall over accuracy for your model projection and model metric decision-making process. And then, how would you explain a neural network to a novice person? Just having that language like top of mind, if you haven't touched it for a few years, it's going to be super hard for you to, I'll speak for myself anyway. So I'm sure a lot of you out there are able to do this just at the drop of a hat at any day of the week, no matter how long it's been. But for me anyway, I knew that I was going to get nervous in the interview, and so I just went over this information like data science 101 stuff in a lot of detail. And, a lot of it was review, but just having that language top of mind, like this machine learning algorithms cheat sheet, analytics maturity model. And then I went into, I didn't fill all this out, but, all the common classification algorithms, the regression algorithms, so time series, tree algorithms, natural language processing, neural networks, a bunch of stuff on neural networks. This is 16 pages, so I'm not going to go through all of it here, and it's not really complete. I'm happy to share this if it would be helpful to people, but I could see how this could be a lot. I know a lot of people might think that this is just a little bit too much prep or things to go over, but that's really what it takes to get into Google. There's hard work involved in this, and please don't take it lightly. If you get the opportunity, and give it 110%, go over the top with prep, take your time through it, and just assume that it's going to be super hard. So that's my bit of advice for getting through the interview. I hope that this information was useful. I am hoping, as I mentioned, to make this a series. So please, please, please like, subscribe, just to kind of give me some indication that this content is even useful for people. Write in the comments if you're interested in me reaching out to other team members. I've got one slotted already for next week, so we'll do that and then go from there. You know, if there's a lot of interest, I'll see if I can get a couple other ladies around Google to help me out. But hoping that this information hits home and that it's helpful, and I wish everyone the best and look forward to seeing everyone's comments. All right, have a great rest of the day, guys.